It's awfully good for managing society and getting laws passed. I love to pass laws. As I say, quickly mention it. And people will still vote. Left wing, right wing, oh, well, get this. And that's what they say too. You don't vote new politicians in. You simply vote the present bunch out. You're so sick of it. Because they generally break every law that they said that they'd defend or whatever it happens to be. But as long as they get the agendas done and signed and all the agreements for further integration of NAFTA or whatever it happens to be, or global integration with transatlantic treaty and pan this and pan that treaties. This goes way back to the early 1900s, the same organisation with all of its different amalgamation treaties. Hasn't changed. It's the biggest club on the planet as far as power goes. But they don't like to talk about themselves much. They used to bring on members on television to advise governments, just for the TV. And they'd say, member of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, or Council for Foreign Relations, or the European Institute for International Affairs, or the Far Eastern Pacific group, blah, blah, to advise, without going into where the group actually, where they got their authority from. They gave it to themselves. That's where they got it from. In a sense, and again, they completely infiltrate. Most of them in high levels of government are members as well. But they don't mention that when they run. They don't tell you that when they run for politics. Or they'll say, we're not members at the moment. I mean, they've left their club for the moment. That's what they pretend to do. But the very fact they've been in it in the first place tells me all I need to know. Because they never leave. They never leave. Come on. But you're not supposed to think about that. Think about the cost of living. Think about your day-to-day struggles, because most folk have struggles. People who don't have struggles don't worry about what's coming down the pike. They're always the ones that go into utter shock when it actually happens. Because traditionally, the way to see who hits first is the bottom strata first. Well, I'm okay, it's not boring me. And I can get by, I can afford it, blah, blah, blah. And they're always shocked when something hits them too. Always. I mean, really, really shocked. And they let it happen. Because when they could have said something, they say nothing. Most folk want to be safe. I'm all right, Jack. Don't give me any problems. I don't want to hear that. It's unpleasant. And if you look at the history of the world, the most unpleasant things that have ever happened because everybody shut up over a generation at least and let it happen. And since we're into the system, well into the system, and I know what's coming down the pike with this complete cashless society, it isn't just cashless, I don't mind cashless, it's everything that goes with it you don't understand. I've given talks before of the big players who helped develop and create the part of history you're going through right now with their cultural changes and their laws. Many of them, and actually maybe most of them are actually dead now, but they planned it in the last century and wrote about it in great detail, and they worked big working groups with the CFR, with Royal Institute for International Affairs and the Pacific group as well. But they planned with groups to develop new cultures. And Bertrand Russell talked about it in good detail about that, the scientific time, when they would run it all through the appearance of science, right down to eventually government, just like the old communist idea. Don't think that communism was a different agenda here. All experiments were run by the same bunch, if you haven't quite got that. And incredibly well studied to see what they can get from the best and combine them together. But Bertrand Russell, who was a lord, remember, and lords don't have any intention of giving up what they own and the privileges they have at all. They have no intentions of that. And he talked about how government eventually would put so much, it could be credits, call it whatever you want, bings, credits, whatever you want. It makes no difference at all what your seed is called, and your little tokens, and they'll put them into a bank for you. It doesn't even have to be a real bank, you see, it can be electronic. And they'll give you the same amount across the board according to your working strata, because the class system is awfully alive and well, even in communist China. And to be good, you can withdraw what you need out of it for that, say, 2-week period. But you can't, anything you don't use at the end of that is gone when more is put into it next time by the government. So you can't save it up.
They may all be equal at that strata, but above you, you have a different system altogether for those above, and that's the privileged system. The ones who, quotation marks, serve the system. The bureaucratic elites and all the NGO groups and so on, and the commissars. That's what it's all about. But if you're bad, or you've asked the wrong questions, and now it's down to even asking the question, but you're not allowed to, you didn't know it. Because even questions about certain things are legal now. They'll withdraw, they'll stop a bit of hold on your money or your credits, and you can't get it out to pay your rent or anything, so you suffer. No food, blah blah, that'll teach you. Look at the Chinese system. China is a model state for the world. And they're using their likes and dislikes for a form of social approval and disapproval. Now, they can generate as many sock puppet fake answers as they want to your little thing, your little site. And right down to every purchase you make. So what do you think of me buying this? Was it a good thing I bought this eco-friendly, blah, blah, blah. And you get all the approvals or disapprovals. And that goes right down to how you're viewed by your government. Your government runs it all, you see. Where you're going to get credit cards or not credit cards. Where you'll be allowed to see certain state-sponsored, say, shows or whatever. Or not allowed into it. Punishment and reward, punishment and reward. A model state for the world. You have no idea what's really going on. And this incredible layer of almost invisible and to the most of the public unknown bureaucracy, strata upon strata upon strata of bureaucracy, dealing with all of this. Never mind the neuroscientists and psychologists, blah, blah, blah. And all types of economists working together, and legalists, etc. None of this is mentioned when you vote what you think is your main candidate in. You know, the personality you're going to get into, you think. What a joke. And you know, too, it's just like Trump and you know that neocons are just continuing it hasn't stopped the massive wars, perpetual war. I read the articles from the military's own magazines at the time. Perpetual war, they called it. That's how it's going to be. And it isn't just a war to standardize the whole world for the masters of the world that you do have and you don't vote in. It's a war against all of your claimed rights. Rights of independence, rights of having a mind of your own, rights of being able to say what you think. It's a perpetual war. Haven't you got it yet? Haven't you got it? Because you're seeing the same approval, disapproval here in Canada and the States and elsewhere as you're seeing in China. See, we had it first before China got it. You haven't quite realized that, have you? Well, don't expect the media to tell you. Although lots will copy what I'm saying here and tell you now. But what I'm getting at too is the reality of how everything really is. Back to Trump, and then back further to Obama. Obama was the new guy who was going to end all the wars, right? I think there was 3 wars in the go the US had at the time. When he left, there was about 7 or 9 of them. He got the Peace Prize. So you knock off a few countries before you get that prize. And I can remember Donald Rumsfeld congratulating Obama for continuing the same neocon agenda as the neocons had before. And now there's Trump in as well. There's a lot more I could say. I could talk about books that were written by people who were allowed to write books about the groups that were behind a lot of it. So it doesn't matter who you vote, even if you've got a really naive person, and Trump isn't naive, even if you were Truman from the Truman Show, utterly naive, you would soon be put straight as to how the world is going to be run. While you're in, you wouldn't even need to be told why it's going to be run that way. You'd just be told it's going to be. And if you didn't cooperate, the whole establishment and all the media wouldn't cooperate with you either, because they're all owned as well. The saddest thing for people to learn is how much people generally are sellouts to each other. Complete sellouts. Complete, utterly. And it's disgusting. For money, say filthy, look at how they'll sell out everybody that they know. And even their own people. Or even a class, it makes no difference at all. It's pretty disgusting, actually. When you see that, you might go into depression for a while. If you're really naive. And most folk are. But that's how bad it really is. There's a massive system that's been here long before you were born. And it planned a world order. And the world order, by the way, I love how people will poo-poo you if you mention that word, even though the elite themselves have churned out book after book for the last 100 years with titles like World Order or The Coming World Order, etc., etc. How about Jack Zatali as an example? Just one. Winners and losers in the coming world order. And presidents do it too. But isn't it amazing how they can take reality in the media? If you say it, if they're targeted you, make you sound like a nutcase for saying it. Because most folk won't even read or they have no idea. I had a cop once ask me, well, a little joke, hope the New World Order, eh? So this man says, what one are you talking about? I rattled off about 5 to him as his jaw dropped. The titles of the books by reputable people. But anyway, that's how it really is. That's how it really is. It runs the system with something vastly different. You're only going through a little journey here. Your whole life here is a little journey. And everybody before you was in their little journey, and like once they come after you. And each phase of it all is already planned on a massive scale of what has to be accomplished in your time. All you have to do is pay for it all and do what you're told. That's really how it is. And suffer too. If they want you to suffer, you're going to suffer. Now, I'll put a link up tonight. John Pilger had a video out last year, I think it was, about China and America and their relations and so on. Right down to possible war with China, but it's dramatic title, etc. But he's awfully good as a documentary filmmaker, and he's one of the few that actually goes to places and puts his life on the line at times to get stories and to get the truth. He's definitely far left, and he doesn't criticize China much at all. But in the documentary, he will, if you really look at it, he'll show you the incredible amount of bases that America has around China, but he also shows you bureaucrats within China. You have the same kind of bureaucratic spiel that we're used to, with the kind of face, a little smile, like they don't believe it themselves, and that's how they do it. Listen to it, that's how they do it. They're all the same all the world over. Doesn't matter what system they pretend they're in. And you'll see the one, for instance, a younger fella in China who's an economist too or something, but he's very successful, and they get awfully lots of, just like we do in our countries, our unelected bureaucrats, these organizations I'm talking about. They're just there, they run everything. You don't vote them in, your government doesn't even mention them to you. They'll get these incredible privileges that you can't get. Well, you see them in China with the massive buildings they're allowed to live in, huge, big, gated communities, and lots of perks. And what you're seeing is a class. I see a class system where John Pilger goes into it or not. You're seeing a really class system. Of course you are. And they'll say, well, our difference is our government rules over the capitalist system, so it can't dominate us and tell us what to do. Who's kidding who? If you have a big money system, and you have people who are getting hypnotized with the glitter of the coinage there, and churning out millionaires and even billionaires, and you have people managing that money and trade and what it's going to be worth, you are at the mercy of those who rule the money system. Even if you pretend it's your own government that runs it, you're kidding yourselves. And that's all I'll say in that. But anyway, you'll enjoy it. John Pilger does definitely do a good job. But sometimes doesn't ask a lot of hard enough questions that they're the right people. I don't see any good guys anywhere on the planet, actually. And don't forget that China is an essential part to the Western world, because the groups I'm talking about here, like the Russian International Affairs and CFR, they set up the massive trading blocks. They set up the World Trade Organization. They set up the transport of all your factories to China, physical transportation of all tooling, etc. We paid for all your tax money, paid for it. I've given talks before. Go into the archives at cuttingthroughmatrix.com. By the way, send me a buck or two if you can, once in a while as well. You'll see how to do it at cuttingthroughmatrix.com. Or buy the books there, get the discs as well. But I've given so many talks about this, how it's done, how it's set up, how that had a massive crash and loss of economy and manufacturing jobs. We, through our tax money, paid for them all to move all these big so-called patriotic corporations. Who's kidding who, eh? they keep the names while they're tooling and stuff and sell you the stuff back at there should be a fraction of the cost, but no. What they do is they have a fraction of the cost of manufacturing, but the prices stay the same or go up even higher. Incredible, eh? Isn't it? But yeah, you're free. You're living in a very fair and just world, so let them rule over you, these people. That's okay. And you'll never catch on. Never catch on. And the wars continue, perpetual wars for the big military-industrial complex. And guess who loses? You'll lose back home. You always lose back home. Look at the state Britain's in. Look at the state of it. The murder is getting towards the stabbing murder rate is higher than New York. It's roughly the same population size, but it's higher than New York and getting worse. Now they're calling it the carnage to come this summer because it's going to escalate. And they know what's causing it. They know it's bringing more people in from across different countries. They're going to get more and more of it. They know it is. Of course they do. And it makes you wonder if it's planned that way. It has to be. I want to put up a whole bunch of articles from Canada to do with the World Refugee Council. If you didn't know you had one, it's been here for an awful long time. And CG is a big part of it in Waterloo, Canada. That's to do with global governance, CG. And Waterloo University is involved in a lot of the studies too. They're always studying us all under the microscope and planning things too. You don't vote them in, but they do it anyway. And use your tax money, of course. But they talk about greater political accountability necessary to reform the refugee system. And you have a Mr. Axworthy here in Canada who's been a lifer, I think, so probably the CFR, but because it's a CG thing, which is CFR. I'll put up the members of this World Council. Trying to find how much money they get is not so easy, but it's phenomenal, as you can imagine. And they've got tremendous power to... They don't call it immigration anymore, they call it big mass migration. That's what they're looking for. The same terms I saw back in the 70s, coming from the Rockefeller Foundation, who were working on that at the time too, what was to come, what they wanted to come, etc. And that's what you've got. And don't forget too, with free trade, very few folk read it, and you'll see it's also the free flow of goods and labour, but it's also, now they forget this labour, don't even work now, just people across the world, for those who haven't got it. But it's a one-way street because you can't go to those countries that they're coming out of and just go and live. It's just open border for those coming in. And that's how it's planned. And I'll put up information on Lloyd Norman Axworthy. These are people who they call statesmen, put them way up there, and to all these top positions and things which you don't even know exist. But it's incredible. He's also, I think, up there with the World Federalist Organization. Very old organization to transform the world into the system we're talking about here. So why bother voting for people when they're already members of all these different things to do away with your countries, and you still vote for them as though they were a national government? It's a joke. I'll put up a PDF too on this organization, on the council members of the World Refugee Council, and their goals, etc. I'm also going to put up too the digital economy, jobs of the future, and the emergence of a new social compact. You should take these terms very seriously, because it's the IMF headquarters dreamed it up for you, International Monetary Fund. Again, we're talking about one massive organization here, and where they're going with it all. Also, I'm putting up good articles on Britain's first WhatsApp fingerprint conviction, which led to a flood of new cases. Police have revealed after a criminal was caught using a photograph of his hand holding drugs. And you think it's all there to help you, all this tech. You're in the biggest prison that's been built, and they make you buy your chains. Never ends. Never mind the fact that all this, on-screen touching something. It was all to get your fingerprints in the first place, but this is actually photographing you, touching something else, and then get your fingerprints from it. They've got everybody sussed out completely. This is the prison you're in. Way beyond this whole idea of you're going through right now the broken eggs phase of mass migrations and all the fallout that comes with it, and welfare and countries plummeting with the cost of it all. But that's just a thing that will come and go. What we're looking at now is a long-term thing, which is total observation 24 hours a day of every single person, without exception, except for those who get privileges above, just like they had in 1984, where O'Brien could bring in Winston to his own place and turn off the television monitor with Big Brother on it. It's a privilege that they got above, you see. There's nothing that's happening now that wasn't thought of long ago. And also, you'll find Commonwealth Games facial recognition software to stay, but when it will be used, the Queensland government won't say. They're putting it in too for the games. It's all to save you and to help you and protect you and all that stuff, because it never leaves once it's all done. I'll put that there too. Also, again, the digital economy, jobs of the future, and the emergence of a new social compact is awfully important. I've mentioned it 3 times already, but the fact is, look it up and look at it. It's the new social compact. And also, I'll put up a whole bunch of articles in the White Helmets. In fact, because there's some articles in Britain, I think Panorama did one, BBC Panorama, of how literally they're a front group and they're pretty well fake, and they're well funded by Britain and other countries too. One of them was in 2017, is the UK FCO financing terrorism in Syria with taxpayer funds. We know they were, for goodness sake. The West funded all the different morphing of the same group that kept fighting against the government in Syria. You know that's true. It can't be denied. Whether you like it or not, the fact is... See, it's not... I don't take sides in it. I'm just telling you what, if you like it or not. The fact is, your governments are overthrowing countries one after another. And each one is a mess with mass migration flooding out. They destroy countries almost into the Stone Age. And that was the plan too. And you're left to pay for it all in many different ways. Many different ways, including back home with the mass migrations into your countries of folk who literally haven't got a clue about your culture, your laws, or even care about them in many cases. Also, Pink Floyd frontman leaks email exposing how White Helmets recruit celebrities with Saudi Arabian money. That's another one too. And there's nothing new in that as well. But also, US State Department Spock plays dumb on White Helmets funding question as well, because they can't keep it under wraps anymore about the White Helmets. Mind you too, a lot of this is... These groups that set up, and I'll put one of them up for you to look at. There was an ex-mercenary set up the so-called massive so-called charitable group to funnel money to these places to entrain them. You wouldn't believe what really goes on. Nothing is ever what it seems to be. Nothing is. And also one of the children that they used for the washing off all the toxic stuff, and it was put across the world by the Western media. Oh, look, they've done it. And they got this child talking about it, say we just snatched off the street into the hospital, taken upstairs and scrubbed down under the camera. And his dad talks about it, saying there's nothing wrong with them. There was nothing happened there. They just made a video of it, and he wasn't even coded with anything. He's fine. In fact, they say he was more at risk of getting a cold from getting soaked and left naked and wet than because nothing else had happened. But quite a few articles on the White Helmets and so on too. Nothing, as I say, nothing is what it seems to be. It's really sad, isn't it? How we're deceived and deceived and deceived. And it goes on and on and on. Now I'm going to put up an article on the police culture now in Britain, which I'm sure is the same elsewhere too across Europe, to see just what the shenanigans that go on with the culture of those who are now called police today. It's quite amazing. Another one too is also a detective who is in the brothel industry in Britain. As I said, ties right in, of course, is that some of the articles I mentioned a few weeks ago with top ex-police chiefs in Canada in on their shares on the legalizing of the drug industry. They have their shares in the corporations that are allowed to grow it and sell it, I suppose. What can you do with a system that's falling apart like that, eh? What can you say? And also, too, as I say, the articles to do with the carnage coming up, and some would expect the knifings all over in Europe to escalate like crazy. It's all these different gangs that are now there. And let's be honest, a lot of them too have come in recently, put it that way. It's easy pickings in a country that's fallen apart with its common sense and its resolved. That's what happens. Terrible, isn't it? And the Liberal government in Canada, now that they're legalising all the cannabis, etc., proposed decriminalisation of illegal drug use and simple possession, but they're talking about other drugs as well. So, and also they're now bitching about the Supreme Court's free the beer ruling sparks fears of cannabis trade restrictions and passing between province to province, etc. As the big boys at the top decide who's going to get most of the business and where they can trade and sell it and so on. We're all going the same way, aren't we? We're all going the same way, all the countries. Planned that way too, but the ones at the top, don't think for an instant that they're going to suffer from any of this. They will not suffer at all themselves. They don't live amongst you. They don't. And we'll all die off gradually. You know that's going to happen too. And the population, that might take them 30 years, will be reduced bit by bit by bit by bit across the whole planet gradually. And what I do too, remember, is that I'm not giving you bad news. I'm just giving you things as they are. For those who can handle the news, at least want to know what's happening and how it happens. Because some people resent this covert way of managing us, this herd management. We resent it, and we're given the choice to vote the same. Doesn't matter what party you pick, they're all the same. You must do what their masters tell them, and the masters have never been the people. That's the way it is. Think about it. Well, since Grundy the groundhog is out, and hopefully stay out now, I hope to get some decent weather, and hope you do too. For myself, Alan Watt from Ontario, Canada, it's good night. May your God or your gods go with you.
You know? So, but this is the thing that your average clown, your average Joe Schmo imbecile clown, who's probably a hipster sitting in some, gastropub, in some chic city, is sitting around going, yeah, those conspiracy theorists don't know anything that they're talking about, and they believe Bohemian Grove isn't just an old man's club where they got to blow off steam, because they're a know-nothing piece of trash. That's what they are. That's what these hipsters and these coincidence theorists are, know-nothing pieces of trash whose parents didn't raise them, and they themselves were low-life pieces of trash.
Yeah, I remember watching Who Took Johnny on Netflix and then researching Paul Benassi, the whistleblower of the whole thing.
It's a nice documentary to vomit to. Yes.
And Paul Benassi talks about going into the redwoods in San Francisco. He doesn't even know he's describing the Bohemian Grove.
Know what it's called. Yep.
But Paul Benassi told things to Noreen Gosh about her son Johnny that were too similar. Therefore, he had to have known Johnny in person post-kidnapping. So that is why I have no problem saying that I totally endorse something like that, because I believe that Paul Benassi, Ted Gunderson, the Franklin cover-up guy, John DeCamp, I think those sources are so reliable.
Yeah, people really should read the Franklin cover-up by John DeCamp. Maybe some of these imbecile hipsters will believe it when it comes from a state senator. It has to come from a member of the government, right, for it to be true. Okay? Then they'll say, just magically, I would believe it if it came from the news. The media always tells us the truth. Here's the other thing. How did this millennial hipster trash generation get to the point where their brains are so goddamn broken that they believe what the mainstream media sells them every night. I mean, you want to talk about they need a fire hose to get the Kool-Aid down the gullet fast enough. Give me the fire hose. Oh, wait a minute, I need a funnel. Shove a funnel in there. Now the fire hose. You know? I mean, seriously. I mean, what planet do these hipsters and these trash millennials come from? What planet are you from? You actually believe the media is trying to tell you the truth? You are a mental midget moron. There's no other way to say it. You can't say it nicely. There's no other term. Your brain is full of liquid shit. How's that? Is that good enough? Is that an easy enough way to say it? Okay? You don't know a thing about a thing. That's it. You don't know one thing about the first thing. Okay? And it's sad. It's sad to see these people are having conversations all around every night. Oh, yeah, those conspiracy theorists. No, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a person who researches the nature of reality on this planet. Has nothing to do with theorizing anything. I apply scientific methodology and truth-seeking methodology, and it's called the trivium process, to learn about what is true and what is not true. And you want to have all these things stacked one on top of another, and you want to say it's all coincidence. You wouldn't say it's coincidence if somebody broke in your door with a shotgun, pointed it to your head, and you'd still say it's just a coincidence. I'm not actually being robbed. You know, that's how stupid these people are. You know?
Well, it's incredible. You think like, oh, we really need someone to get the courage on the inside to come out and expose this stuff. And then Smedley Butler, most highly decorated veteran, and then Dwight D. Eisenhower come out and say, yeah, wars are for money, and there's a military-industrial complex. And people still don't buy it because the co-opting or the propaganda response, the disinfo afterwards, the framing of the story is so strong, we can get a president to come out and say military-industrial complex, or Smedley Butler to say war is a racket, and people will still support wars based on false flags. The Gulf of Tonkin was after Eisenhower said, watch out.
No problem, reaction, solution. Yeah.
I know. The USS Liberty was just incredible things.
That's the power of mind control. That's the power of mind control and media propaganda. Here's the thing, Keith. Here's what they told me. People say, how'd you get out of the dark occult? Very easily. I turned around and walked out the door. And I was never heard from again, and no one ever contacted me again. It was that easy. Okay? Because I didn't, quote unquote, know where the bodies are buried. I was never initiated into these societies that high. Okay? To where a point where I was actually working in crimes, in criminal activities that they conduct, and murders of people that they conduct. So I never reached that level of the big club. Okay, they just recognized I had good communication skills, that I had a lot of passion, that I didn't give up, and they wanted me on their team. That's it. So they were slowly grooming me for that, but they never took me into their confidence with larger stuff. Okay, when I was at a ritual one night in Northern Maryland, a higher level member of the organization, I was speaking with him, and when I said to him, I am beginning to understand more about what this is about, and I didn't really sign up for human enslavement. I signed up for an understanding of the occult as this is compartmentalized knowledge that is most people don't understand, and those who do understand it get a leg up on those people. So like if I get this, I might be able to manipulate somebody, because I was very in ego and living for only my own purposes and my own desires at that point, okay, until I understood all of this, and that really shook me out of that mindset real quick, okay. And I said, I know the occult knowledge can give me an advantage when it comes to human psychology, and if you have that advantage, you're going to translate that into a power advantage in the world, and you're going to make more money than the other person, you're going to get better opportunities than the other person. So I said, that's why I'm in it, for just my own selfish reasons, okay. And now that I'm realizing that this society is way bigger than what I thought it was, okay, these groups are they have hooks. It's not just this group. You have to understand that. This was not, they're not calling themselves one group. This was eclectic members of people from all different elements of Satanism. some people were attracted to it from the Temple of Set, some from the Church of Satan, some from, other Luciferic orders, or just average people who had not even really studied it that deeply and just, were tapped by someone because they had abilities and skills and they wanted to see what they could do for the network. Okay? The overarching network, you got to understand, it doesn't have a name. They don't call themselves the Illuminati. They don't call themselves the Satanists. They don't call themselves the Luciferians. They don't call themselves, the Great Brotherhood or any other name. They don't have a name. This cult doesn't have a name. There is no thing that they refer to themselves as. It's just to them, it's us. And everybody else is those we're going to enslave and we're going to have power over as gods. That's it. That's all it is. Okay? They're not going to refer to themselves as something so that they can be identified easily. Okay? There is no name for the big cult that runs the world. Okay? It's an eclectic, diverse organization of networks that work together for common causes, for common goals. Okay? So when I told him, I recognized this is all like everybody here, they're all connected into something bigger. Okay? And that's something bigger. What it's really trying to do is enslave everybody. I'm like, I didn't sign up for that. That's not what my personal goals are, to help you enslave everybody. And he basically said to me, there's the door, boy. Just like that. With no concern. You don't like what we do here? You think we need you? Goodbye. Just like that. Okay? So he said, you make a decision. You're on board and you're with us and you'll go farther, or get out now. There's the door. And we don't want anything to do with you. And there will be absolutely it will be like you don't exist to us. He said something to that effect. It'll be like you never existed. You don't exist to us. You make that decision, and that's your one chance. You're either here on this side or you're going on the other side, and you don't exist to us. Okay? And I said, well, you don't even care if I tell people what you do and what your plans, your goals are, and how you do it? He said, let me tell you something. If we wanted to undo the trance that we have put in our history of our network, our organization, our family, whatever you want to call it, okay? If we wanted to say, here's the legacy of what all the people who are in our line of knowledge, okay, have done to human beings, the trance mind state, the entranced mind condition that we have put them in. If we wanted to come out in the open to the public and say to them, we did this, this is how our group is structured and organized, here's its history throughout time, and here's how we did it, here's all the methods, the methodology that we use to do it, and here's how we put people in the condition that they are in. He said, if we publicly disclosed everything that we know and that we have done, the public would not accept that reality from us, ourselves, even though we are the ones who have done it and can explain how we have done it. The public would still choose to exist in ignorance and say to themselves, because it's more comfortable, no, this isn't happening. No, this can't be done. No, this has not been done. No, it is not like this. This isn't about doing anything new, folks. This is about not doing the things we're already doing. The solution doesn't lie in building anything new. I hear this all the time. We need to show people we can do this way, this way, this way, this way, by building all this and that and that and that. And none of that's required. I'm not a person who thinks we need to build all this stuff and have it already ready and waiting for we're not going to do this anymore. Now we have this to go to. I don't accept this as the solution. The solution is just to stop doing the things that we are doing that are wrong. That's it. Nothing else. We don't need to build a damn thing. We need no new solutions in place. If you are one of these people that think you have to tell me every single solution for why this, and that can be done or should be done or how it could be done. No, I don't need to do no such goddamn thing at all. I'm explaining to you Here's what's being done. It's wrong. Stop doing it. I don't care what you do after that as long as it's not another wrong. Not interested. Not in the slightest. What I am interested in is actions are being done that people don't have a right to take, that are taking my freedom and everybody else's freedom. That's what I'm interested in. I'm not going to build any other systems. Like, you think I'm going to use my knowledge, wisdom, scientific know-how, anything? I'm not contributing. I will let this world crumble to dust before I build something and then the controllers take it. No, we need to stop complying and say, I'm going to quit my job. I'm not building any infrastructure. I'm not helping you at all. Everything that I do is going to be toward the great work of ending this slavery before one other thing is created. The answer doesn't lie in creating anything new. The answer is apophatic, as all truth is. Don't do the harmful things that we don't have the right to do by taking other people's property and rights and life. That's it. Stop doing those things. Everything will organically change after that behavior is not engaged in anymore. But no, nobody wants to hear that. No, because they want their comfort. They want to end slavery in pure comfort. Oh, we'll just magically slip into the new magic slippers. These old leather slippers are all worn out. So we'll slip magically into the nice pearly slippers. Okay? And it'll be a wonderful transformative process with no pain required. Because why? Because we deserve a painless transformation to freedom because of what we've allowed, all the shit we've allowed. Yeah, keep telling that to yourself. This is going to be, we are way past that point, folks. You believe this is going to be a non-painful process, you're a prankster with yourself. You're pranking your own mind if you believe that. Okay? And it's not about building the new. It's about destroying that which should not be. That which doesn't have any right to continue to exist. This is truth and freedom are destructive processes. And you need to stop this ridiculous little child. It's a childish notion. This is a child. I need to know that I can step from this platform to this platform and I'm not get hurt. You're a child. You're a child. You're a child. Who cares about whether something's safe versus whether it's right or not? Can't you see how fucked up that is? People can't see how fucked up that is. They don't want to see it because they want the easy answer and the easy path, and there is no easy answer or path. The answer is stop doing the harmful behaviors that you have no fucking right to do. And then you'll see a world based in freedom. That's the real answer. But no one wants to hear that, so I'm unpopular. I won't get invited on any big talk shows to talk about it, Keith, okay? All right? You know what? I'm much more happy with being interviewed by somebody like you than to some of the bigger imbeciles who don't want to know what the real solution is and aren't really dedicated to truth, okay? So I'll take smaller venues like this to put out how I really feel rather than sell out and go to people who I know that they're not really interested in the real solution and they want to take measures that are half-assed measures at best. Okay? We have to change the condition of human slavery to a condition of human freedom. That's the ultimate purpose for why we are here in life. All of us. We have a shared purpose to end the immoral condition that we are being held in duress and slavery, and to make humanity free. Free to do what? I don't know. That's what I want to find out. What is our real potential? That's what drives me to do this, because I don't believe that humanity's potential is endless death and destruction. I believe humanity's potential is endless creativity and understanding. And we could go to the stars. That's where I believe is what I believe is possible. That's my worldview, okay? But that ain't going to happen in the current condition that humanity's messed up mindset is in. We have to get it way transformed from the current human mindset of what is bumping around in between these temples nowadays with most human beings, because it's really badly screwed up. And we're not going to accomplish that goal unless more people become teachers of natural law and objective, true morality. Until we get enough people that want to do that work, expect the conditions to stay the same and grow infinitely worse even. So, that's my ultimate message. I'm telling you that because you have to get yourself spiritually prepared. You have to get yourself spiritually prepared to be ready for and prepared for what is coming. What is coming is not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty. I'm not a psychic. I don't have any special powers. I am going by what I observe. And what I observe is a completely ignorant population that is infinitely more ignorant in the last 10 years than they were back in 2007 and 8 when I thought humanity actually had a chance of waking up. They hit us with the sledgehammers since then of propaganda and untruth and disinformation and just absolutely preying upon people who have naive minds. I'm telling you, the ship has turned around 180 degrees and we are going exactly in the wrong direction from 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I had way more of a positive outlook and hope that things could be turned around. And today, I'm telling you right now, everybody better start getting their houses spiritually prepared for a very negative time that we're going to all be going through together. And that's why it's important to learn from each other and support each other, because we're going to need to build some networks in place to have some support in these times. Because I'm telling you, what's coming is going to be dreadfully dark. I'm not saying that to discourage anybody. This is not fear mongering. This is my assessment of what the world has been, the people of the world have become. And it's tragic that it had to go that way, because there is enough technology and knowledge in the world for people for this to reach everyone's eyes and ears. And you know what we're doing with it? We're squandering that opportunity. We're squandering it. So I think that's a good and honest place for me to leave it, with the appeal that it doesn't have to be that way. That's not written in stone. That is not how it must be. That is what we are collectively choosing with our free will to make it be like, because not enough people are learning objective morality and teaching it to others. And we are rejecting it as a whole, as a species, and therefore we are going to have to suffer the consequences, because no one escapes law. Not man's law. No one escapes the laws of the universe. So I think that's a pretty decent place to leave it for this one, Keith. And do you have anything else? Let's wrap up.
Everything you do is being criminalized. For instance, if you don't handle your bank deposits and withdrawals in a certain way, you can be imprisoned, and your entire bank balance can be confiscated. If you happen to transfer an amount over $10,000, you will be reported by your bank to law enforcement as a criminal suspect for nothing more than having and moving $10,000. If you transfer your funds in smaller amounts, you can be accused of trying to avoid the $10,000 reporting rule, and you can be imprisoned, and your bank account can be confiscated because you transferred amounts less than $10,000 at a time. And that's been defined by your government as money laundering, a crime. This is real. They're actually confiscating property when they think you have too much, prosecuting you when you don't have enough. Many things that normal citizens do with their money every day have been arbitrarily classified as crimes. And whenever crimes are involved, confiscations and prosecutions are right behind. Criminalization of your harmless behavior is a favorite pastime of your elected officials and public servants. Your personal management of your personal property, whether that's money, land, your car, or credit card, has been regulated by tens of thousands of laws. They don't teach those laws in school. They don't provide convenient access to those laws online. But they tell you that your ignorance of those tens of thousands of laws is no excuse for violating them. Prosecutors like to brag that because there are so many laws, they could prosecute any American on 3 crimes a day anytime they wish. I promise you, you are not compliant with the law. I promise you, you are a criminal according to our current legal framework. And this is what so many people seem to have a hard time believing. If you are charged with a crime in the United States, you are 5 times more likely to be convicted and imprisoned for that crime than in any other country in the world. You can point out any authoritarian police state warlord dictatorship on the planet, and the USA has more people per capita locked up in prisons than that country. 5 times more on average. The United States is the imprisonment capital of the world, with 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners. So this nonsense of the United States being the world's most free and open democracy is what propagandists call the big lie. The United States is neither free nor open. So how have we lost so many of our freedoms? Our public servants and bureaucracies no longer seem to be concerned about protecting our freedoms and serving the public. They now seem to have the idea that they are supposed to make money from us. In government, that's not hard. They simply take it by force. If you could do that, you would probably look for new ways to do that every day, just like government is doing to us now. One of the easiest ways to rob people is to call them a criminal. You see, no one in society seems to care if you rob or tax a criminal. And when government calls you a criminal, everyone else just goes along with that. So government constantly and continually makes laws and regulations so they can call more people criminals and take more money from more people every time they criminalize more things. Penalty and confiscation revenues are now a major portion of most federal, state, and local government budgets. Permits, licenses, penalties, fines, fees, confiscations, and taxes are all the same thing to government. More for them, less for you. Of course, they'll pass some of this money back to you in petty benefits just to make sure you keep voting for this system. Whether you get government benefits or not, you are throwing a major portion of your income down the black hole called government, and they are constantly changing the rules to raise the ante. There is no limit to government greed. Institutions have no morality. Taking your money is good, not taking your money is bad. Without some very vigorous pushback, we will shortly have absolutely nothing left for ourselves out of what we earn. Millions of people are already at that stage. If you think someone is a criminal just because government calls them a criminal, you are part of the problem. That is no longer the case. If you think someone is a suspect just because government calls them a suspect, you are part of the problem. Government is creating a new criminal offense literally every day, more than 400 a year. Every year, and the rate of criminalization of normal, harmless behavior is accelerating as fast in the USA as ever has happened in any totalitarian regime in history. Government turns people into criminals for profit. The terms suspect and criminal no longer mean anything. If we do not reject the classification of suspect being defined more and more broadly every day, you and your family, your friends, will be penalized, robbed, and imprisoned at a higher and higher rate by people who are doing so under color of authority, under the protection and force of the state, and under a profit motive, taking your livelihood out of pure greed and calling it legitimate government business. You cannot call the cops when the cops are robbing you. It is no good to write your congressman when your congressman is robbing you. And they love to brainwash us. They talk about paying our debt to society. The criminal does not have a debt to society or to government. The criminal only has a debt to his victim. When was the last time you heard of a court taking a fine and giving it to any victim? Judges actually put a portion of the fines they take into their own pension funds. Would you say they have a conflict of interest here? When a judge sees you walk into his courtroom, he cannot see you. He can only see dollar signs. If we are ever to have justice in this country, we are going to have to look at the concept of crime very differently. We are going to have to insist that in order for something to be truly criminal, there must be a victim filing a complaint or claim. There must be an injury, damage, or loss caused to a human being which requires remedy. If there is no injured party, there is no crime, and there is no criminal. I know that our laws, codes, and regulations say differently, but the moral and legal principle on which our country was founded, if you have not caused injury, if you have not harmed anyone, you are innocent, and you may not be penalized. No injury, no crime. No crime, no penalty. Media propaganda says we are all criminals, and we must be spied on, controlled, and penalized constantly so we will all behave ourselves, and chaos will not erupt spontaneously. Education, law, and government has trained us to think that any behavior is criminal if there's a law, code, or regulation calling it that. Calling something criminal does not make it criminal, just as calling something fruit juice does not make it fruit juice. In order for you to have a crime, you must have an injury and the intention on the part of the criminal to cause that injury or some evidence of negligence where the injury should have been prevented. Believe it or not, rolling through a stop sign is not a crime. Speeding itself is not a crime unless the speeding is the direct and only cause of an accident. Whether or not speeding causes the accident, the crime is not speeding. The crime is causing the accident. Sometimes you can avoid a collision by speeding. Speeding itself is not a crime. By telling us that speeding itself is a crime, government takes hundreds of millions of dollars from drivers every year, in most cases when no one was injured or damaged in any way. Sure, speeding is often hazardous, but the proper way to deal with that is to penalize people who cause an accident by speeding, not by penalizing speeding when there is no accident. Penalizing behavior for behavior's sake is simply a way to cast a huge net over society and penalize and rob millions of innocent people every day without providing any real deterrent or public benefit. It is pure theft and massive unjust government enrichment. Some countries have experimented with doing away with traffic laws altogether, and traffic accidents did not increase at all. What prevents accidents is good highway design, markings, signage, not highway pirates robbing you for your behavior. It's a simple human nature. It's stupidly obvious. People do not want to have collisions on the highway. We're going to try to avoid that, whether or not government is sending out squad cars of revenue collectors to nab us. If we're informed that texting and driving is a terrible hazard, we will adjust to that and try to keep from killing ourselves. We don't need laws, we simply need information. But just giving us information does not make government rich. Making government rich is the new and exciting fad that our government discovered for itself back about 30 seconds after government was created. The idea that society would be a chaotic, crime-infested hellhole unless you have police, government, and piles of laws is a ridiculous lie. The most peaceful civilizations in history were those that had no government, no laws, and no police. Most of us simply want to live in peace, and we do not need a police state to calm us all down. Yeah, we can be paranoid, we can fixate on all the dangers in life, we can allow a quasi-military assault force to make us all feel safer. By doing that, we are letting government pretend they can eliminate all problems in society by punishing and fining any behavior that they decide is risky or inappropriate. That is a major problem, because that means We can be punished for doing anything the government calls risky or suspicious. The government can take our money by telling us we are behaving badly. Government has turned that into a growth industry. There's no limit on what government can call bad behavior. There's no limit to the amount of money they want to take from us. This has become a major problem for society. In case you have not noticed, government is out of control, and you cannot manage your money freely without risking being put on some suspect list. This is a major defect in our civic structure. Our government can use its authority and monopoly on violence to enrich itself. We have been brainwashed into regarding everything government does as legitimate. It's no wonder they're taking our money. We're letting them. We're not objecting. We're not resisting that. Government, which should be challenged constantly, is hardly ever challenged because government tells us they're always right. Anyone can tell you they're right. Does that make them right? Never be suckered into the criminalization propaganda and mindset. Never view someone as a criminal for simply being called a criminal by government, or for harmlessly disobeying a behavioral dictate made up by a bureaucrat. A few basic rules are always a good thing, but we are way, way past that now. It is not the business of government to make judgments on our harmless behavior, and government needs to be told that. Here's how to keep your perspective on who is and who is not actually a criminal. If there is no injury, no victim, no damage, no violation of rights, no loss of property or opportunity, then there is no crime, and there is no criminal. Carrying a bag of marijuana is not a crime. Giving drugs to children is a crime, because drugs are harmful to children, and the harm can be seen and recorded as evidence. But unfortunately, when something can be harmful, government does not just criminalize the harm. They love to criminalize everything associated with the harm, so their net of fines and penalties can be cast much farther, and government power can be made absolute. Putting solar panels on your property without a permit is not a crime. But it's amazing the amount of criminalization we've accepted and now take for granted. Refusing mandatory state education of your child is not a crime. Exercising property rights is not a crime, such as refusing to pay property tax. Refusing to be enlisted as a slave is not a crime, such as assessing taxes on earnings from your own labor. Refusing cooperation or compliance with a public servant is not a crime, although if there is an immediate concern for public safety, compliance is probably a good idea. The point is, you do not owe service just because government wants your service. You are not a criminal just because government or the law says you are. Government no longer operates on a moral foundation of right and wrong. Government now operates on a foundation of self-interest, self-protection, self-promotion, and senseless control of the public in completely excess and inappropriate ways. This may go against your view of how to make an orderly society. Nazi Germany was an orderly society. Order may be nothing more than evidence of tyranny. Order may be nothing more than the prohibitions on freedom, the elimination of rights, and the suppression of liberty. You are just as unsafe when things are too orderly as when they are disorderly. In fact, you are far more danger when the state is committing crimes against you than when we are all simply trying to get along on our own terms without state control. Civil forfeitures by law enforcement, the wealth that government outright steals from the public, now exceeds all the money and property stolen by non-government thieves and criminals every year. Let that sink in. All the damage done by civilian property crimes in the nation is now exceeded by the damage done by supposedly legal civil forfeiture. Civil forfeiture is theft committed by the state, and all they had to do was pass one simple law saying that was okay. This is what happens when no one's questioning the legitimacy of government. We are no longer overseen by the limited and morality-bound government of the past. We are now overseen, ruled, you might say, by an enemy, a very hostile and powerful enemy who has targeted what we earn and what we have for seizure by any means possible. And when you are the government, everything is possible. They have openly declared war on us by civil forfeiture, by unlawful searches and seizures when we use air travel, by mass surveillance on all of our digital devices, by IRS theft without due process, by taxing the most basic right, the right to own property. Government has declared you are nothing to government but a place from which to steal money. How safe will you feel when the police find a reason to suspect your car was used in a crime and they seize your car in a traffic stop? It happens every day, and no one's even charged with a crime. They just take somebody's car. What would you think if that happened to your neighbor? We can turn against people we know just because government tells us to do so. Your neighbors, family, and friends, and even strangers on the street are not criminals unless they have intentionally caused injury, damage, or loss to another human being. They are not criminals just because a corrupt and greedy government calls them criminals. True criminals are a very rare thing. If there's no injury, damage, loss, or violation of rights, then there is no crime, no criminal, and no legitimate authority by the state to penalize, fine, tax, license, certify, obstruct, or prohibit anything. You are not made safer by allowing your government to punish everything in sight. We must learn to protect ourselves for a change and tell the government to stay out of our affairs. Only when we are all recognizing the dangers of statism and authoritarianism and demand that our government stay inside a small and well-defined box can we stop and reverse the very obvious current trends towards state tyranny, control, and the wholesale impoverishment of society. Our government has now admitted that it conducts unlawful mass surveillance on every American. But our government does not prosecute itself for its crimes. Crimes committed by government are utterly without deterrent. When they are exposed as criminals, they don't even stop committing the crimes. Tell me this is not out of control. Through your credit cards, your smartphone, your household electric meter, on nearly everything you do, government is collecting a high-resolution diary of your minute-to-minute life from the day you are born to the day you die. All they have to do is look at what you are doing and call it a crime, and you are then owned, controlled, robbed, and persecuted by an out-of-control state apparatus full of amoral bureaucrats who simply want to take your stuff. Like magic, government can criminalize anything we do, but we must shove that magic genie back in the bottle. We must demand more affordable government, more ethical government, less authorized government, less government overall, and we must replace it with government that is more interested in providing service to us than enriching itself on us. We must make this a common theme in our daily activities. We must talk among ourselves to determine how we will accomplish this or attempt this. We have a lot of that work to do before we will ever get back to anything we can call a free country. Does this country belong to government or the people? We can clearly see that if we don't decide that ourselves and take some action on that decision, government decides that for us. And when they do that, we lose. Government will always take from us as much as we let them take. The only thing that will ever limit the size and greed of government is when we, you and I, all of us, stand up and say no more. If we don't start doing that soon, no more is exactly what we will have left.
Let's see. How many of us have these in your pocket? Keep it on. I want the NSA and the president to hear everything I'm telling you. All right, to more serious trials of guilt or innocence, and to my topic, which is the natural law. When Thomas More had his last opportunity to address something for posterity and knew that his effort would be futile, he was defending himself in his trial for treason. So he's the defendant and the lawyer. The alleged and proven act of treason was silence. The refusal to assert affirmatively and in writing that the king was the head of the church on earth. He made the following argument to the jury. Now, he knew the jury had been handpicked by the king's judges, and the king's judges had been handpicked by the king. He knew that he was going to lose this. He knew he was going to be found guilty. He knew he would be executed, and the execution method was beheading. Some men say the earth is round, and some men say it is flat. But if it is flat, could the king's command make it round? And if it is round, could an act of parliament make it flat? Now, when he was making that argument, he, of course, was not only appealing to the jurors' common sense. Of course, the king couldn't make a flat earth round, and of course, the parliament couldn't make a round earth flat. He was appealing to their understanding of the laws of nature that restrain even the government at the time. Henry VIII, who was about to have him beheaded, and the Parliament, which was the facilitator in his beheading. So his choice between remaining mute at his trial and being convicted, or taking a stand for something as affirmative as the limitations on the government, he exercised that choice by giving this now classic statement of the natural law. Fast forward to the present day. When Moore said that, this was not a novel argument. He is not the originator of the argument of the natural law. The modern day, it's 800 years ago, but the modern day originator is St. Thomas Aquinas, still the best explainer of the natural law. But John Locke picked up on this, and Thomas Jefferson picked up on it when he wrote the Declaration of Independence, and James Madison picked up on it when he was the scrivener for the Constitution. Jefferson's version of Moore's phrase is this: we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so can you tell me a little bit more about natural law? And you just kind of give me an idea of how you came to understand this, kind of the genesis of this.
Well, I mean, how I came to understand it is really through enormous suffering and doing the opposite of aligning myself and my behaviors with natural law, and understanding that I was only going to get more suffering that way. I highly recommend not going down that path. I wish that humanity wouldn't choose to go down that path. It seems that collectively humanity is choosing to take that direction. I speak out about this topic and try to explain how this works to people, because I don't want to see humanity continue to go down that path of suffering that it seems to be taking in the unconscious state that it is in right now, collectively. So that's really what helped me to understand it. I was living a life that was completely out of balance and was not in harmony with these laws of behavior, because that's what natural law ultimately governs. See, it can be a difficult thing for people to accept natural law, particularly if they're of a very imbalanced worldview. So there's an imbalanced worldview toward randomness, or the fact that the idea that there is no governing dynamic regarding behavior in the universe. In other words, everything else could be governed by law. All the physical matter could be governed by physical laws, but consciousness has no boundary conditions and has no governing dynamics that is in place that governs it. And this is often, part of a worldview that doesn't take consciousness into consideration at all. Mm-hmm. So what natural law actually is governing dynamics which act as boundary conditions in nature, and what they are governing is the consequences of our free will choices. So, again, many people don't want to understand this because they want to think that we can do whatever we want and act without consequence, and there's no force in nature that is actually bringing to us the results of what we have chosen through our free will. And another part of it is people often don't want to understand natural law because they don't want the responsibility that goes with it, or they don't want to look at the universe in a certain way. They want to see it as either completely random or as some sort of a caring being that is directly involved in their life in some way, in such a form, let's say, that it anthropomorphizes the universe and makes it have the characteristics or the qualities of a human being with the emotional dynamics that go along with a human being. When you tell people on either side of the fence when it comes to this, the randomness idea that there's no purpose to the universe and that, there's no governing dynamics when it comes to consciousness, because they often believe consciousness doesn't exist, then you have many people on the other side that, look at the creation or the creator as something that is directly involved in people's lives and cares about them in a personal sense. I think both of these are sort of worldviews that will not help people to understand what natural law is.
So if Jefferson's correct, if this isn't just some musing, and by the way, the Declaration of Independence is a statute enacted by the Congress. If you go to the first book of the U.S. Code and go to the first page, you'll see there the Declaration of Independence. Probably the most violated statute by the government that we have, even though it's the first and the oldest. But it articulates the view that our rights come from our humanity. What are these rights that come from our humanity? And if they come from our humanity, how can the government trample them? Well, the concept of natural rights articulated by Aquinas is this, that there are areas of human behavior for which we do not need a government permission slip in order to make free choices in those areas. So things like the freedom to develop your personality. I told O'Reilly he should be grateful for that freedom. The freedom to develop your personality, the right to think as you wish, the right to say what you think, the right to publish your thoughts, the right to worship or not to worship, the right to assemble in groups, the right to refuse to assemble in groups, the right to petition the government for a redress of your differences, the right to defend yourself. I must tell you, the right to defend yourself, the right to keep and bear arms, does not protect your right to shoot deer. It protects your right to shoot at the government when it is taken over by tyrants. These are the quintessential American right. I'm going down the Bill of Rights. The quintessential American right. The right to be left alone. Codified in the Fourth Amendment. Today called the right to privacy. Codified in the Fourth Amendment. We all know what has happened to privacy. Let's see. How many of us have these in your pocket? Keep it on. I want the NSA and the president to hear everything I'm telling you.
Because natural law works like the conditions that govern a computer. And again, many people will hear this and they will hear that to them it will sound like I'm saying that the universe is a computer. I'm not saying it is a computer. I'm saying that it behaves with certain functions like a computer, such that if we put certain things into it, the outcome is going to be guaranteed in a certain way. If you're sitting down at a computer and you're writing certain code, okay, and you're compiling that code and you're building a program, that program is always going to behave according to the conditions that you entered into it. So if you put good code into the program, the manifestation on the screen when you execute the program, when you run it, is going to be as expected. It's going to be efficient. It's going to do what you want it to do. If, however, what you put into it is flawed in some way and you have bugs and errors in your coding, the output that you're going to get on the screen is not going to be what you want. It's going to manifest something that is chaotic in some way, and it's going to put out bad output. Well, this is how the universe works. The universe works like that computer. That computer doesn't really care about whether you didn't understand what you were coding. It doesn't care. It just puts out on the screen what you put into it. That's it.
Yes.
So in a way, that's what natural law is like. And again, that's why it's difficult for many people to accept that this is how our universe works. They don't, on both sides, again, of the fence, a left brain side and a right brain side, people don't want to accept it because those of the left brain bent don't even want to acknowledge that it exists. So those of a right brain bent want to think that it is something that is caring, and it is looking at all the factors about why we chose what we chose. All it does is bring the result. That's all this governing dynamic is put into creation to do. Let me give an example, and I think it might clarify it a little bit. If a child, let's say a toddler of 1.5 to 2 years old who, you know, or even earlier, maybe a 1-year-old who just started learning to walk, okay, is moving toward the edge of a cliff. They're walking and they're moving toward, let's say the family was out hiking or picnicking out in out in nature someplace, and the child broke away from the parents momentarily, and the parents were distracted, and the child's moving toward a cliff. It's a terrible situation to even contemplate, but just humor me for a moment.
Sure.
If the child did happen to undertake the action of moving too close to that edge, and it slipped off and went over the edge, God forbid, okay? But if that happened, would the universe care about whether the child didn't understand gravity?
No.
It would simply still be bound according to the conditions that are in effect in nature. Now, that wouldn't mean... Now, if we ask the question, right, does that mean that the universe hates that child? Or does that mean that the universe loves that child? Neither one of those questions would even make much sense. It simply is a law that exists in nature, and it's non-personal. Gravity is a physical law that exists in nature that is non-personal. It doesn't make a difference whether the being who is moving toward the edge of that cliff on Earth, where there's a 1G condition in place, understands gravity or not. It wouldn't make a difference whether the person was 90 years old and had lived a full life and had understood the laws of physics and mechanics in their lifetime, or whether they were 1 year old and haven't even developed language skills yet.
I started by saying keep it on. Here's the sad thing. It doesn't have to be on for them to listen to us. When I used to say this about BlackBerries and iPhones a couple of years ago, people would say, oh, there he goes again. He's off his meds. He's hanging out with Lou Rockwell too much. But today we all know this is true. Today we know that our popularly elected government has such profound disregard for our natural rights that it tramples them to extremes beyond which even George Orwell could have imagined in 1984. Without getting into the NSA, another topic for another time. If Aquinas was right, and if Jefferson was right, and these rights come from our humanity and not from the government, things like thought and speech and privacy and travel, how can the government trample them? Well, the theory of our government is that we have surrendered some of our rights to the government so that the government will protect the rights that we have not surrendered. That's the idea of the government derives its powers from the consent of the governed. Does anyone in this room know anyone now living who consented to the government? Well, the answer is no. It's inconceivable that anybody still living was around when the Constitution was enacted and consented to it. So right off the bat, the idea that the government derives its powers from the consent of the governed is like government itself, a fiction. The fiction is that we have consented to the surrender of our rights. The reality is that our rights have been stolen from us because the government monopolizes force. It's a sad and terrible reality, but it is reality. In theory, when the Constitution was enacted, and there's a typo in the Constitution, I get in trouble for saying this, the third word is wrong. It says, we the people. Of course, the Constitution was not enacted by the people, it was enacted by the states. But that was never corrected. Nevertheless, whatever was surrendered to the federal government was limited to 16 discrete, unique, separate, stated, articulated powers in the Constitution. And then the Ninth Amendment says, just because we've listed a bunch of rights in the first 8 doesn't mean that others. There are many others. It would be impossible for us to list them all. And the 10th Amendment says, just because we've given some power to the federal government, we the states, doesn't mean that we kept the rest of it for ourselves. We have. That's the concept of limited government. The government must stop when it wants to touch our natural rights. And the list of natural rights, whatever you think our natural rights are, give me the list, I'll add 30 or 40 to them. Because these are the things we all yearn as human beings to do, free from interference by the government. If they belong to us as human beings, like my fingers belong to me, then they cannot be taken away by majority vote. They cannot be taken away by legislation. They cannot be taken away by the command of the executive. They can only be taken away if I give them up myself.
You know, it's not, our efforts are not enough. That's the thing that I want to convey to the people in this room and listening who do understand my work. The effort has to be advanced and stepped up. We need to become teachers of this information to everyone within earshot of our voices, or humanity is going to go down the path I'm going to talk about, which is going to be very, very, very ugly. Natural law is a set of universal, inherent, objective, non-man-made, eternal, and immutable conditions which govern the consequences of behaviors of beings with the capacity for understanding the difference between harmful and non-harmful behavior. That means it applies to intelligent beings who have a developed brain and nervous system like we do. Okay? It doesn't apply to lesser beings, to the animal kingdom. They're not going to sit there and reason. We have the capacity for reason. They're instinctual creatures. They have emotions as well. But we have higher thought functions. That's why natural law applies to us. The behavioral laws of creation apply to humans and more advanced beings, because we have the capacity for understanding morality. A worldwide common sense understanding of true objective morality and the laws that govern behavioral consequence is the only true solution to the current human condition of slavery. For as long as humanity remains ignorant of the occulted knowledge of natural law, it will remain enslaved. And that is by law, by universal cosmic law. By no laws of man will it remain enslaved. It will be enslaved by the laws of creation. For those who are not familiar with my work regarding natural law, I absolutely encourage everyone to watch my 3-part video series called Natural Law, the Real Law of Attraction and How to Apply It in Your Life. What natural law is all about is the objective difference between right behavior and wrong behavior. I always tell people that, we use the same word to communicate the idea of correct and moral. We use the word right to communicate those concepts. Correct means based in truth, and moral means that it is in harmony with natural law principles, because when you take a right action, the result of that action does not result in harm to other beings, to other sentient beings.
Conversely, wrong behavior is both incorrect and immoral. Incorrect meaning it is not based in truth, and immoral meaning it is in opposition to natural law, because when we take wrong behaviors, someone is harmed as a result of that behavior, of that behavioral choice. The problem is, folks, most people still in the year 2018, sad as though it may be to say, cannot properly define a right. They cannot give you the definition of what a right behavior is. And that's why we're losing our rights. Because they do not understand that a right is an action that does not cause harm to another sentient being. And that is the definition, and it is as simple as that.
I can give them up myself by robbing a bank. I rob a bank, I violate the natural rights of the depositors of the bank. I can then be prosecuted and have my freedom of movement taken away. So I have surrendered my natural rights when I gambled that I could get away with that loot from the bank. I could also sign a contract in which I give away some of my natural rights, and I've done that with my bosses at Fox. Theoretically, I'm supposed to say only what they want me to say. In return, they send me a check every week. You know, the checks keep coming, even though I obviously don't always say everything they want me to say. So you can voluntarily surrender your own natural rights for whatever good you choose to surrender them for. But you can't surrender somebody else's natural rights, because natural rights are owned by individuals, by persons, not collectively, not by groups, not by the government, but by individuals. That is at least the theory of the Declaration of Independence and the theory of the Constitution, and was at least the theory of the framers, the founding generation of the United States of America. Regrettably, it is no longer the theory today, and this assault on natural rights began immediately. In the presidency of John Adams, the government suddenly had this bizarre fear of the French. I know this sounds incongruous today, but the country was afraid of the French, so they enacted the Alien and Sedition Acts, which basically said, if you want to become a citizen here, come. If you own an acre of land, you can become a citizen immediately, except if you're French. You have to wait 14 years. By the way, if you criticize the president, the government, the Congress, or the courts, you can go to jail for 2 years. Well, how could the same generation that wrote Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, in some cases the very same human beings who wrote that, in fact, abridge the freedom of speech? Because the world looks very different when you're on the outside trying to acquire power than when you have power and you've forgotten about those promises you made to get there. In this room, after I finish, is the Thomas Jefferson of our day, who never forgot his promises. Sadly, an exception, because today the government tramples natural rights. Today the government, to which none of us has consented, claims it has the authority by majority vote to assault those liberties that are a part of our humanity. You don't have to believe in a traditional true-line God as I do in order to accept this. You don't have to believe in any God in order to accept this. If you believe that humanity is the highest and best virtuous good on the planet, then you believe that humanity, each human being, is the source of his or her own rights. If you believe, as Jefferson and Aquinas and I, that we are creatures of an all-knowing, all-loving God who made us in his image and likeness, and as he is perfectly free, we are perfectly free, and our rights come directly from him. In either way, the rights are ours.
Mm-hmm. The same result is going to happen, and it doesn't make a difference why the person was in the situation. It's a result that is invariable, because that's what a law is. A law is a binding condition that is inherent to creation, and it's also immutable, meaning that it can't be changed. It's always in effect. And it doesn't make a difference if one understands that it's in effect or not. It doesn't make a difference whether one likes the fact that it's in effect or not. It's in effect, and it has a binding effect upon one's circumstances. That's why it's called a law. That's why it's not called a suggestion or a preference or, a happenstance. Okay, it's a law, and we tend to accept. Many of us, or most of us, I should say, tend to accept that there are physical laws in creation that are operating, that are immutable, that govern all the laws of, let's say, mechanics, dynamics, meaning motion, thermodynamics, energy, etc. These laws govern everything from the movement of the subatomic particles up to the movement of physical objects in our everyday life, up to the movement of planets and stars. And we accept that they're governed by immutable laws that we can learn, we can observe, we can discover them, observe them, and understand how they work, and even come up with models mathematically for how they function. And then we're in a better position to be able to predict what will happen in certain physical situations. That most people readily accept, But when it comes to us, when it comes to human beings and our choices that come from the mind, okay, that ultimately generate the reality that we're collectively experiencing here on the earth. Many people do not want to accept that those choices, those fundamental free will decisions that are made by mental processes by human beings are also governed by law. So in other words, I'm also not saying that we don't have free will. We do have free will to choose our behaviors. What I am saying is we don't have free will to choose our behaviors without consequence. There is always a consequence to the behaviors that we choose in life. And the consequential dynamic, okay, that is being brought to us by creation itself, the intelligent organizing principles that are inherent to creation, okay, that is consciousness. I'm saying that the universe is a conscious entity, and that force, you don't even have to look at it as an entity. I look at it as almost like an impersonal force, but of total intelligence. And it is the governing dynamic that is bringing to us the consequences of our free will decisions. So we have both free will, and then there is a deterministic component to creation. And that's what natural law is. It is that deterministic component that acts as the boundary conditions or the governing dynamic for free will. So in other words, there is a limit to free will. Okay, so people would say, well, then it's not free. Well, if you want to look at it like that, okay, but I don't look at it as the universe is punishing us or is putting us in a prison where we can't just do anything. The boundary conditions that I refer to as natural law are here to promote our best evolutionary development. They're not here to put us in a cage or a prison cell. They're here to guide us and to keep us on the right track so that we can actually go forward and evolve at the most efficient way. That's what natural law is. So I give the soundbite definition, or what you could call the working definition, that natural law is the universal, non-man-made, binding and immutable conditions that govern the consequences of behavior. It is a body of universal spiritual laws which act as the governing dynamics for consciousness. That's what natural law ultimately is. This is the new tactic. It's dissuading instead of actually trying to physically hold the information back from people. And that's where people are at when it comes to this knowledge of the occult and natural law. They don't really understand what either one of those things are. They have their own connotative ideas floating around in their mind about what occultism entails. And they have their own connotative definition about what natural law means. Instead of really actually looking into either one of these topics, They hear the word, and they hear what they've been told about what those words means, that the words or phrases, occulted knowledge or natural law, and they have this emotional reaction to it, and it says, well, I already know, somebody told me this is what this is about, and I already know that I don't need to understand that, or there's nothing to that, or that's bad and I shouldn't look into that. They don't actually really know what it is. They don't know what occult information or occulted knowledge is, and they don't know really what natural law is. Okay, so really, you could say that natural law has 10 overarching expressions or overarching dynamics that are part of it that are going to, we need to understand how they operate to understand these causal factors that are at work in our lives. So let me just lay out the 5 expressions, and then we could talk about the 10 aspects of them, the 5 positive and the 5 negative. There's the generative polarity. This is what we use. It's the force that we choose to align ourselves with at the beginning of any creative process that is what we use to create what we're going to create. The outcome, in other words. We're using a force, ultimately. So there's a force. You could call this the generative force. That might even be a better word. But it's a polarized force. Okay? Mm-hmm. There is polarity inherent in the universe. I mean, for people to say, oh, there's no such thing as duality, okay, you could see that everything is just, a manifestation of one aspect of a polarity or its absence. That's one way of reconciling a duality. But to say that the polarity doesn't exist at all in the physical domain is not true. For example, people will say, well, fear is an illusion. Yes, it is. But does it exist? Are people experiencing it? It exists in this dimension, in this reality. People are experiencing it. Okay? Yeah. Is that an illusion?
It might also be an illusion, but it exists here, in this illusion,
that's right.
Basically.
Where you are at, it exists. It has an effect. It operates. So, again, that's we can't confuse the ultimate level of reality with the level that we are experiencing here in the now. Here and now. Okay? That's why people aren't creating what they want to create, because they're not being here and they're not being in the now. Right? Mm-hmm. Their mind is somewhere else, and their mind is sometime else. Okay? Instead of bringing it here now and actually learning about the requirements for doing something about what's going on in the here and now, and then actually doing that through an act of will. People don't want to hear that. They want to hear some portal is going to open any moment right next to, right on your street where you're living. You're going to be able to walk through that and go into another world where all of this isn't happening. The whole idea of the rapture. Okay, it's just another variant of the rapture. We're going to ascend to another dimension of being, and all the consciousness, the individual units of consciousness that don't get what's really going on, they're going to remain here on the physical earth. Well, this is all New Age mumbo-jumbo, and it's all stuff, it's all wishful thinking. It's just like, put your head down and do everything that the master tells you to do, in this reality, in this lifetime, and then you'll magically be gifted with a wonderful life in some hereafter, in some afterlife, okay? Which is, what the controllers told people in, the ancient world to get them hooked onto these religious notions of, a promise of an afterlife, and therefore they would accept their life of slavery and misery in this life, okay? We have to learn to be here now, be in the present moment, and look at what's going on where we are in this place, instead of concerning ourselves with other dimensions and other times, okay? I'm not saying none of that exists, but that's not where we're operating. We're operating on Earth at this moment. That's where we have to start from. So, to go back to what we were talking about, this is about polarity. Right? And polarity does exist here in this dimension where we're operating. So the first expression of natural law is what I call a generative polarity. So the word generative, it comes from the Latin genere. The verb genere in Latin means to create. So this, you could call this the creative polarity. The polarity that we use to create the outcome. Okay? So that's the first expression of natural law. The second expression I call, and again, we'll get into what the positive and negative aspects are in a moment, but the second expression is the initiating expression, or the initiatory expression, however you want to word it. You could just say how it starts, the starting expression, okay? When you choose one of the creative polarities to work with, something manifests almost right away, okay? You are going to go into a mode of consciousness based on what you've chosen with that creative polarity. So that's the starting condition. You know, you could say, here's how it starts out of the gates. That's how you want to look at the initiatory expression of natural law. So we have the creative polarity. That's the force that we work with. Then something happens when we start using that. That's the starting expression. A simple, easy term of putting it is the starting expression. Okay? Then we have, as the starting expression continues to work, we have the internalized expression. This is the thing that's going on within the human being, or I would say it's what ultimately gets created or generated within the individual unit of consciousness, the individual, the monad, again, okay? This is what happens inside of us, right? So that's the internal expression for natural law. Then, of course, if there's an internal expression, there's going to be an external expression, okay? So that's what happens in the aggregate, meaning in the total. Okay, that's what happens in society, in any given society where there are individuals. Okay, so we have an internalized expression and then an externalized expression. All right, and then we have the ending manifestation, the ending expression. You could look at this as the opposite of the initiating expression. Okay, something starts and then something ultimately gets made. All right, so this is going to be based on, this is the result that we create based on all the other things. All right, that we just went through. The creative polarity that we chose, the starting expression, the internal and external expressions, and then something gets manifested. So this is what I simply call the manifestation. You could call it the end expression, okay, or the result, either any way you want to look at it. Okay, these are just terms that we apply to help understand the model better. All right, so this is the manifested result that we create based on the creative polarity that we chose. So let's look at each one of these dynamics. Again, I went through 5 dynamics, right? And they each have a positive expression and a negative expression. Or you could look at the positive and negative sides or poles in this model as, here's the things that we could do that will get us what we say we want, and here's the things that we could choose that will never get us the things that we say we want. That's the simplest way of looking at this is if you look at the positive expressions for these 5 dynamics as here are the requirements to obtaining what we want. And the negative expressions are if we do these things or let these things continue to be done, then it's impossible to obtain what we want.
And not the governments to be taken away. The Constitution was written to prevent the government from doing that, except when it does it by due process. Due process means if I rob the bank and they want to take away my freedom, they have to give me a jury trial and the full panoply of protections that come with it. The governor can't just arrest me, as the governor of New Jersey did, not me, he'd like to, 2 weeks ago with a nurse who got off the airplane at Newark Airport because she had been treating Ebola victims in Western Africa. Before she could get on another plane to Maine, they locked her up. They put her in a tent in a parking lot in downtown Newark. They gave her a bottle of water, a granola bar, and a porta potty. If she had been charged with murder and had been lodged in the Essex County Jail a mile away, she would have had better creature comforts and a more secure environment than a parking lot tent in downtown Newark. And I made the argument that the governor of New Jersey has flipped natural rights. You see, natural rights, you can summarize them in 3 words. 4 words. The presumption of liberty. The presumption of liberty. Meaning we are self-directed. We make our own choices. It is not our obligation, as New Jersey claimed was the case for the nurse, to prove we are unworthy of incarceration. It is the government's profound, unique obligation to prove that we are worthy of incarceration, and it must do so before a jury of our peers. An imperfect system, but the best system that we can come up with. In fact, when the governor of New Jersey was told, there's not a federal judge in Newark that will fail to give her a hearing, and we have no evidence that she's contagious at the hearing, you better let her go now, because if you lose in court, you know, your friend at Fox News is going to make sure everybody knows that you knew the law and didn't follow it anyway. So he let her go right then and there. And then his buddy, the governor of Maine, tried the same thing. And there they went to a federal court who released her because the government could not overturn presumption of liberty. The presumption of liberty says the rights that we did not surrender to the government, we retained for ourselves. And they can never be taken away from us by popular vote or majority in the legislature or a command by a governor or a president. Now, if the government recognized the concept of natural rights, it would know that virtually everything it has done, certainly since the progressive era, at the beginning of the last century, and perhaps even since the Alien and Sedition Acts, virtually everything it has done other than to protect natural rights has been wrong. Question, is there any legitimate activity government has in a free society? Answer, yes. To protect the natural rights of the people in that society. Meaning instead of assaulting my freedom, my life, my liberty, and my property, protect it. That's what we have a government for. And a government that believes in natural rights will limit itself to those behaviors. Do you know, have you ever heard of, anywhere in the universe today, of a government that limits itself only to the protection of natural rights? That, of course, would be our Rothbardian, Jeffersonian, John Lockean, Thomistic, as in St. Thomas Aquinas, ideal. Will this happen tomorrow? No. Will it happen in the lifetime of anyone in this room? Maybe within the lifetime of the youngest in this room. And that's why we're all in this room today. We need to understand the force of darkness among us. And that force of darkness is the very government we have elected and empowered to impose the darkness upon us. The better we understand it, the more we understand it, the sooner we can be free from its shackles. I expect that when I die, I will do so peacefully in my bed, surrounded by people that love me and faithful to first principles. That will not happen to everybody in this room. Some of you, particularly the young people, must be prepared to die in a government prison. And some of you, particularly the young people, must be prepared to die in a government town square to the sound of government trumpets blaring. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. Because freedom lies in everyone's heart. But it must do more than just lie there. Thank you, and God love you.
I've said in past presentations, sometimes I sit up at night and laugh at the ridiculousness of what I do. Really. I laugh at how ridiculous having to present basic information like this is. And yet the majority of human beings, it's falling on deaf ears. The following actions are examples of the initiation of aggression against others. which is what all wrongdoings are. These actions are violations against natural rights and therefore constitute violence. Murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, and coercion. And you could think all you want about any wrongdoing that can possibly be committed. I've challenged many, many people to do this, and you will recognize every single wrongdoing that can be committed against another human being is a form of theft. There is only one wrong, theft, in one form or another, and there is only one law in the universe. Don't steal. That's it. Every wrongdoing comes down to an act of theft. Provably. Murder is the taking without just cause of the life of another, which does not belong to you. Assault is the taking without just cause of another being's physical well-being, which does not belong to you. Rape is the taking of another's free will sexual consent, which does not belong to you. Theft is the taking of property, physical property, which does not belong to you. Trespass is the taking of the security of another person in their domain, in their dwelling place, which does not belong to you to take. Coercion is the taking of another being's free will, which does not belong to you to take. Every wrongdoing is a form of theft. There's no wrongdoing anyone can think of that is not a form of theft. Natural law versus man's law. Natural law is based upon principles and truth which are inherent to creation. Man's law is based upon dogmatic belief systems which are the constructs of a diseased mind. Natural law is only ever harmonized with due to knowledge and understanding, or not harmonized with due to ignorance. Man's law, on the other hand, is only complied with due to fear of punishment. Natural law is universal. It exists and applies anywhere in the universe regardless of location. Man's law differs with location based upon the whim of the legislators who are making up these decrees and commands. And that is a form of moral relativism, the idea that we can decide what right and wrong are, that they are not objective and inherent to creation because they are based upon actions. Natural law is eternal and immutable. That means it exists and applies for as long as the universe exists, and it cannot ever be changed by any action that any being within the universe can do. Man's law, on the other hand, changes with time based upon the whim of legislators, which is also moral relativism.
Get ready.
If a man-made law is in harmony with natural law, it follows logically that it is redundant, since it is stating a truth that is inherent, pre-existing, eternal, and self-evident, or it should be self-evident. Therefore, man's law is both irrelevant and unnecessary. If a man-made law is in opposition to natural law, it follows logically that it is both false, meaning it is incorrect, and it is immoral, meaning it is harmful. It results in harm to other beings. Or in other words,